The following is a special production of the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Welcome to Tough Enough, a recap and breakdown show from the MMA Outsiders following every episode of The Ultimate Fighter Season 31, Team McGregor vs. Team Chandler. And now, here are your hosts, Tom Albano and Zain Bando.
The end is here. It's the end, Zain. Zain, you're back, and you're back just in time for us to finally put this show to bed.
Very true, Tom. How much did you miss me? Be honest.
Yeah, I missed you. I'm one of those people where it's like, yeah, maybe I can handle a show by myself, but it's not as fun. It's not as fun unless I have somebody bouncing ideas and thoughts off of.
No, understandable. Well, I'm glad to be back for the season finale, and we'll recap the madness and the criticism that was TUF 31. For those of you who haven't seen the episode yet, we'd just like to remind you that we will give you a 5-second warning before we reveal the spoilers. And obviously, if you haven't seen the episode, it probably is not the best idea to watch this stream. Before we get into everything, though, it's good to be back again. I'm Zain Bando. To my left is Tom Albano. Before we get into the show, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Be sure to follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network across all social medias. Be sure to follow the MMA Outsiders at MMA Outsiders ETB. And be sure to follow the network at ETB Network. And be sure to hit the notification bell on YouTube so you get notified of everything across the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, including more episodes like this next year, the MMA Outsiders, and everything else that's going on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, which just hit 500 subscribers. So please be sure to keep hitting that subscribe button as we reach closer and closer to the membership tier. And thank you again for tuning into another edition of Tough Enough. It's been a very great addition to the network, and we hope you guys have enjoyed it despite my absence. Now we can finally get into the episode that was the final episode of the season.
The 5 seconds. That's why I threw up the 5.
Yes. Before we get into it, we're gonna give you 5 seconds right now for those of you who haven't seen the episode. Here's the countdown.
Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, it's time for us to, if you're here, okay, we assume that you have seen the episode. We assume that you've seen pretty much all the episodes for The Ultimate Fighter Season 31. That's why we're here. We're going to get right into it. Zain, we can't really talk about the episode all too much, only because the only real focus on the show this time around was Cody versus Rico. I mean, it was nice to see all the bonding afterwards, with the when Chandler came over and they were eating the crawfish. It was nice to see McGregor take his guys out to a casino owned by the Fertittas for a steak dinner. I think the other big part of the show, Zain, was just the back and forth between Cody Gibson and Brad Katona when Chandler was over at the TUF house. But Cody Gibson had to get past Rico DeSulo in their semifinal fight first. And guess what, Zain? That happened!
Yeah, that happened, and that happened, and the time for talk is going to be over in a couple of days, and it's going to be very interesting to see if that fight continues to build. So we'll get right into it. Cody Gibson versus Rico DeSulo. As we both know, Cody Gibson representing Team Chandler, Rico DeSulo, the only prospect to make it to the finale, so to speak, from Team McGregor, which is pretty crazy to think about considering that Team Chandler has dominated the entire season.
And I want to go over that verbiage, by the way, because they all made it seem like, Rico DeSulo was the last Team McGregor guy left. And it's like, technically, yes, he was the only one from Team McGregor to win his first round fight. But Brad Katona jumped over. And we talked about how unsurprising it was that Brad Katona made the jump when offered during the semifinals to jump to Team McGregor because that's where he trains out of. So I'm just, I get the sentiment, but it's just the reality is there is a Team McGregor guy in the finale, and it's Brad Katona.
Yeah, and as you can tell, I was a little bit nervous saying that, just considering that the prospects have done so poorly that I couldn't think of any other verbiage to use, if you will. So
Oh
it's
no,
kind
you
of
used the right verbiage. You used, but here's
yeah,
my
yeah.
question. Here's my question, and because we were going over this and we were a little confused when we were doing the preview of the show like 3 months ago. How the hell can we call Rico Da Silva a prospect? I guess in the sense that he never made the UFC, but he's 36 years old. And that's something that caught my attention when McGregor was going on about, oh, that's something I'd love to see in a young kid, like a young MMA kid. He's 36 years old. He's older than the two of us.
Yeah, he's past his prime in MMA years, if you will. But hey, you have to give him credit for giving this thing another shot. And to be honest with you, I hope it works out for him in some capacity. But in watching this fight was not competitive from the second the fight started until the second the fight was over. His lackadaisical foot movement was really bizarre, in my opinion. Obviously he was kicking himself for shooting in for the takedown, but nonetheless, he wasn't going to win that fight anyway. Cody Gibson is much more enhanced MMA experience, if you will looked a lot better. Obviously, got them out in position, dominated him, and ended up winning by a really nice arm triangle with seconds to go in the round, which is even more impressive to think about. It was just a total dominant display by someone where you could tell that they had worked for 8 years to get back to a position. This wasn't a Cody Gibson that was looking to go in there and look all lackadaisical and win a close decision. This is someone that wanted to go in there and win, and that's exactly what he did. And he did it in probably the most emphatic fashion we've seen on the show, minus a couple of other fights. And he just looked absolutely astronomical. You wouldn't talk about a near flawless performance. I give him a solid A. He looked unbelievable tonight.
Yeah, absolutely looked absolutely unbelievable. And Zan, I agree with you because I get why Rico was kicking himself going in for the takedown, slipping, and Cody Gibson just completely dominating on the ground. But this is one of those situations where, and he has every right to kick himself, by the way. I would be feeling kind of the same way. But this is what we call in the four big sports the fallacy of the predetermined outcome. He is saying that, because he slipped, it ended up costing him the fight. You don't know if that really is what cost him. It definitely hurt him. But let's say he doesn't slip. Let's say he doesn't go in for that takedown. Does Cody Gibson end up taking him down in that round and dominating anyway? So, because
you never know, but given the way the fight went, I think you could lean on the assumption 60-40 that, yeah, that probably does happen. Yeah.
So that's my point, in that Cody Gibson could have dominated anyway. And pretty much this was as you said, a non-competitive fight. Cody Gibson flat out dominant on the ground. That's where he won the fight. And my concern going into this fight, Dan, I even mentioned it last week, was that basically it was that basically Cody Gibson's leg was what I was concerned about, because I had mentioned, and sorry, I got distracted. Apparently there's something going on with our Instagram page with one of the posts that we just put up a little while ago. The clip where we're talking about Logan Paul, Dylan Dennis. I'll look at that in just a second. But my whole concern was that this was a show, Zan, that was taped over a short period of time. Cody Gibson had a partial tear with his MCL. And I said, this is going to be bad if he continues to go forward. And he continued to push forward. And I said, if he draws the wrong matchup, this might be it for him. But then he drew Rico, and I'm like, okay, maybe that's a little better, because Rico was the semifinalist. I was, at the bottom of my rankings. But I was concerned about the injury to Cody. But I shout out to Michael Chandler for what he said at the end, in that Cody Gibson is one of the fighters of this season, in that at the beginning of the season, we didn't know where his head was at. gets the awesome finish in the opening round fight, has the injury, and is forced to question if he should go on with this. And he ends up going on, gets another first round finish of Rico DeSulo, and now he's going to be facing Brad Katona in the final fight of the season, in a pretty hyped fight considering the back and forth that they had afterward. I mean, during the show, like right before the fight, and the intense stare down they had after the fight.
Oh yeah. I mean, okay, so here's a question that I have for you in regards to the back and forth. Do you think if the back and forth was not taped, that this fight would not be getting the potential buzz that it will get over the next few days, or do you think there was already something brewing there that we didn't know about before that whole exchange occurred? Because Katona was making it seem like Cody Gibson had said some of these things before, and it was the same old story. And to me, that was kind of confusing just because I don't remember in any of the other episodes them really getting into it. Maybe it was just because of Brad Katana's betrayal of his initial team. That's probably where it stems from. But what did you think of the back and forth, and do you think it helps hype the fight?
Well, let me ask you, because you mentioned the word betrayal. Do you think it was a betrayal? He did say on episode 1, the only allegiance he has is to Brad Katona.
Yeah, I mean, now looking back, that seems like a hypocritical statement. Am I wrong in saying that?
At the same time, I'm not surprised, because when the semifinals come around, Zain, and I think you should know this better than anyone, at that point, it becomes an individual competition. At that point, teammates start to fight teammates, and if it's not a surprise that if he was going to go over to, again, he trains with McGregor. He trains at SBG Ireland, so it's kind of unsurprising. If your coach was on the opposing side and you had this opportunity, would you not go over?
Yeah, even if that meant like let's say you were my initial coach, and even if that meant leaving you, I'm gonna have to do what's best for my career at that moment. So I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah.
So that's where I come off of it a little bit, but I do agree that I think, for all the bad ratings that TUF has gotten, the fact that these two actually have the kind of platform that they have, Cody Gibson and Brad Katona, to promote their fight, I think it actually kind of helps. So I don't know I kind of want to say yes, in that if they did not have this platform, I don't know if the fight gets as much of a hype as we could get with how they are now.
Well said. Okay, so in looking at the fight holistically, now that we kind of know where Cody Gibson is going to go, he's obviously moving on to the live finale. So congratulations to him. Was this Rico DeSulio's last shot, or do you think the UFC gives him another fight moving forward? And by the way, you might know who this better than me. Are there other TUF 31 competitors? Well, what happened?
Okay, that's what's happened.
Okay.
Apparently Dylan Dennis just reposted the clip of us talking about him and Logan Paul. What?
No way. Where?
He posted it to his Instagram story.
Oh,
wow. I think I need to walk away for a little bit.
No way. Oh my goodness.
This happened.
Now I have to go post it.
Now you have to go post. Zain, you're the one who talked you're the one who talked and said the fight wasn't going to happen. Oh dear God.
Holy shit.
Okay, what was your question? I'm sorry.
No, my initial question was, do you happen to remember if the UFC announced that other TUF 31 competitors would be competing on UFC 292, or are they going to be getting other fights?
I would assume they'd be getting other fights. I look at the UFC 292 card. I don't see anything there. I see. No, I mean I see Hubbard Hallbaugh. Obviously, I'm just looking at the Wikipedia page. They don't have the updated fight card with the bantamweight finale fight now. I mean, I see Zain from a couple of seasons ago. I see Andre Petrosky on the card from a couple of seasons ago, but I don't see anybody else on there. I would assume, Zain, some of the guys that competed on this season that put on just some great displays, like Timur Valiev, I think should get another shot. I think Jason Knight, for the fight that he had with Kurt Hallbaugh last week, I think he should get another shot. I would love Zain. And maybe I say this with a little bit of bias because he likes all of our TUF 31 posts, but I would love to see Aaron McKenzie get another shot.
Of course you would. Of course you would. There's a little bias there.
I said there may be a little bias, but I would like to see Aaron McKenzie get his shot with the UFC. I'd love to see Trevor Wells get his shot with the UFC too, because I thought he and Timur put on a pretty decent showing in the out of all the opening round fights. I thought that one was the best.
Oh, for sure. Timur Valiev is someone that I think you can watch for a long time and not be disappointed.
For sure. I think he definitely... well, those were the two guys, and remember how much I was bitching saying, oh, Trevor Wells and Timur Valiev, that they were my two of my picks at bantamweight. I said it was those two and Brad, and I said, how the heck did the two guys I pick get paired off with each other for a first round fight?
Yeah, that was absurd. And remember I told you that Katana had a chance? I did.
I was too. I said the third guy on I had thinking was Brad Katana, and well, Brad Katana is here with the finale. So
unbelievable.
Yeah. All right, Zain. I think it's time. Let's go over this season as a whole. Let's go over everything as a whole.
Okay, so I'm going to start. I'm going to start with you. What did you think of TUF 31?
I thought the action picked up more during the semifinals. I thought the semifinal fights were definitely way more entertaining than the first round fights. I will give some shout outs in the first round fights, and obviously Trevor Wells, Timur Valiev, great fight. Rico DeSulo, I remember the draw dropping moments where he beat Hunter Azure, and you saw Conor going all over the place, going wild. Shout out to Roosevelt Roberts. He also had some pretty good performances with the first round knockout of Gentleman, and then he had a pretty close fight with Hubbard. Granted, the fight with Hubbard was not exciting at all. That's the one thing I will say about the semifinals, is those two kind of crapped the bed on that one. Kurt Hallbaugh, I've been a fan of Kurt Hallbaugh since I got the chance to interview him about 2 or 3 years ago, and seeing the second round submission of Lee Hammond, I was like, okay, good for him. And now he gets to fight Hubbard in the finale. I think, Zain, the show's action was pretty decent, if not good. I think the issue is just the show itself. It was a couple of things about the show itself. Zain, number one, I think the prospects versus veterans format, I think we could all agree at this point, failed. I think it was a failure. Two,
I think it failed too.
I think it was an absolute failure. Two, I know I hate to say it because we're just talking about one of his buddies, Dylan Dennis, but Conor. I think it was this presence of Conor. I know Aaron McKenzie has said in an interview with my editor, Amy Kaplan, that production kind of painted Conor in a little bit of a bad light. Because they did mention, he did say Conor wasn't at weigh-ins, he wasn't at morning practices, but he was at the evening practices. He was there for all the fights. And Zain, actually, we're talking about production. I would be remiss if we didn't bring up Dana's comments from last week about the coaches challenge, where the coaches challenge, obviously people were disappointed by it because, Zain, you think about 7 or so years ago, you have, I think it was Conor and Uriah, they were throwing watermelons from helicopters down onto targets. And now this time it was Conor and Chandler sitting in ice baths and answering trivia questions, which, Zan, how many of those trivia questions did you get right?
I think I got almost all of them.
Same. I said, I wish we got to see the tough questions because round 2 for the questions about the Ultimate Fighter, they just basically did a cutaway.
My guess is that they had to pick tough winners, and once you get past like season 11 or 12, it gets really hard. So
That's being generous. 11 to 12. You could even say season 7 or 8.
I don't know about that. If you know your tough history really well, you should be able to plow through at least the first 11 or 12. But then it gets hard once they started adding like multiple divisions to the seasons, and then you have to remember 2 winners instead of just 1.
Well, they had 2 divisions in the past in the first few seasons. I know there was one. I think it was Nate's season 5. That's when there was just 1 division.
Good point. Oh, by the way, Dylan Danis just saw my Instagram story for anybody who cares.
All right. But giving the overview to see, so yeah, I think Zan, as I mentioned, Dana last week kind of, I don't know what the term is. Could we say throwing production under the bus?
Yeah, I would say so.
We've been talking about, oh, they were in there for 30 minutes and basically chastising them. And it's just, I don't know, Zan. I think the problem is it's become so formatted. It's nice at the beginning because, Dan, if you remember at the beginning of the season, during those opening episodes for the opening round fights, we talk about the fighters' backstories. But then these semifinals, it's just them making the phone calls home. And that's all nice to see. And it adds some human element, as do the backstories. But everything feels so same old, same old. Like, granted,
give them longer than 10 minutes for the phone conversations too, just in my opinion.
And I think, Zan, I know some people don't like the Tough House craziness, but I feel like that added more unpredictability to the show. So seeing something like Katona and Gibson chirping at one another, that was entertaining.
Yeah, and one of the few instances where it got heated. Have you noticed throughout like that season in particular that the house stuff was like super minimal?
Yeah, like, there were the only real things, Zan, that I ever saw get heated on this, just not just the house, but this season in general. Katona and Gibson tonight. Roosevelt Roberts chirping with McGregor and Katona at several.
That was a pretty good one.
That's McGregor and Chandler when they got into the cage and we saw the shove and we saw Dana go out of my way.
Yeah, but that doesn't really count. I was more so asking about like tough house stuff between the fighters, not the obvious elephant in the room, which are the 2 coaches. We both know the coaches are going to get after, but I was more so asking about the contestants themselves.
And in my honest opinions, then, I don't know. Well, actually, let me ask you. What would you prefer if the Tough House stuff went back to, the days of Chris leaving, getting drunk and having the whole spat with Josh Koscheck and ruining the Tough House door, or the days of Julian Lane, Let Me Bang Bro? Like, is that stuff more entertaining? Because, sorry, and I want to go, but I've been thinking about it, Sam. I've honestly been thinking about it since the last time you've been on the show. And I also want to give a shout out to MMA On Point because they kind of brought this up in a video that they did called "If basically did this tough season fail?" And in my honest opinion, I feel like Tough is kind of a relic of its own time. And what I mean by that is, if you think all the way back, Sam, to when Tough first premiered in 2005, that's when reality television, that's the thing. Like, this stretches past mixed martial arts and into media, into television. At that point, reality TV was something a little more new. It was newish, at least, and it was a big thing around that time. Zan, I mean, American Idol was a hit show. Hell's Kitchen was just debuting. The Real World obviously had been around for maybe 5-ish years at that point. The reality television genre was so hot about 20 years ago. And then when the writer strike, quite coincidentally, Sam, we're talking about this as a Hollywood writer strike is going on now. But when the writer strike of
Very well said.
from the late 2000s was going on, then you saw more and more reality TV, and to borrow a term, the bubble kind of burst, and it just became annoying and just overabundance, and there was just an overabundance of it to the point where it wasn't. So my question is TUF just, something of its time, and then in that it's 2023 and we're kind of past it?
Yeah, I think we're kind of past it. And as someone who's watched probably 80% of the series going back to the beginning of it, I would argue that this show is becoming more of a Netflix show where if you told me that all the episodes would get released at the same time right when it comes out, I would have no issues with it at all. And I could just binge it whenever I want. I could pick the fights that I want to actually see. I can fast forward through all of it. I feel like that's what the show is becoming. There's not as much suspense anymore with all the social media and the potential weeks that could happen. It sucks, but it's not 2005 anymore, and the show isn't the same as what it once was. And the coaches' challenges, no offense, they're a great part of the show, but it's obvious even with this cold plunge idea that they're running out of ideas. And outside of some of the fights, and I don't know if you'd agree with this, I think the show is getting somewhat stale.
It is. Because we said, Zan, I think we kind of mentioned it, that when TUF returned a few years ago, I think it was the Petrosky season and all that, there was this feeling of
Vulcan Brian Ortega was the first season guy.
Yeah. And we said, you know what? It feels good to have TUF back. And it was good to see it back. But then it kind of reverted to the same old kind of feel that made it run stale a little bit in the first place.
Yeah, and we were promised all of these format changes, and that didn't seem to happen. Like it was.
Granted, this year was a little bit of a format change, but it just felt more of the same. And as we talked about, the prospect veterans thing it flopped. I mean, and I mean, we rag on Conor all about it, and Conor should get his fair share of criticism for how he's coached. But at the same time, Conor's not in charge of production. Conor's not in charge of the format of the season. Conor's not in charge of the coach's challenge. At some points and just the concept itself, these are guys who have been in the UFC versus guys who have never made it into the UFC. So you're going to have the experience factor, which, is something that maybe we should have thought of about 3 months ago. Credit to, these veterans who, made it through into the semifinals. It's just, the show has kind of run its course. Now, did Conor help things? Some of the stuff of Conor that Conor did, the lack of coaching, the fact that he went 1-7, the fact that he doesn't have, again, we talk about the thing about Katona being a part of Team McGregor, but somebody true from Team McGregor from the beginning. None of them are in the finale. Yeah, you can hold that against him, but you can't hold every single thing against him. And that's the thing, up until these last 3 semifinal fights, everything just kind of felt a little bit of a trap.
It really did. And you were kind of waiting for the moment to say, oh, when is the season going to be over? And now it obviously is. But I agree, the last 3 episodes just felt like, okay, when is it going to end? And when it finally ended, it was almost like a sigh of relief. It was like, okay. And now there's so many other unanswered questions that we'll get into at a later time. But it felt like we were anticipating something the whole season and we never got it. And now it feels like it's coming too late. And there's almost a bit of a disappointment factor. Whereas, for example, the Volk Ortega fight, we knew we were getting it in September. that had been announced months in advance that we were getting it in September. We knew we were getting Peña Nunes too when it was supposed to happen. That happened when it did, et cetera, et cetera. This coach's fight doesn't feel the same way, and I don't know if it's just me being ornery, but that's just how it felt, or the vibe as you kept watching. It felt like you were waiting for something, but it never happened.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Aaron McKenzie with a really interesting reply to Jed Goodman. Jed Goodman posted a screenshot of Conor giving everybody the $1,000 in casino chips. Remember the $1,000 that they won during the coaches challenge? Aaron McKenzie said, we didn't have our IDs at the casino, and they didn't want to deal with following us around, so they make us wait to spend them till after we left.
Interesting.
Yeah. The reason I'm bringing up Jed Goodman, by the way, is because he usually does pretty well with posting the ratings for all the different TUF episodes.
Not just TUF episodes. If you want to follow Jedi Goodman for anything, yeah. He is literally everything.
So I'm trying to find his post from last week about the TUF ratings, although seem to be having a little bit of trouble. Oh, but that's all a day ago. I have to go through all the MMA Hour clips. Because we saw a little bit of a skit, and they talked about it on the MMA On Point video, in which they talked about how the ratings didn't really start good, but proceeded to get worse, except for, every now and again, one of the episodes might bump.
Mm-hmm.
He posts so many clips that it's just... I don't want to say, and I'm not saying that as a bad thing, because Jed Goodman, like you said, is a ratings king when it comes to posting these kinds of content. Just making it a little hard to find some of this stuff. All right, I'll worry about that when I find it. But Sand, overall, just what grade would you give this season of TUF?
I'd give it like a C minus. How about you?
Probably around that. I would probably say a generous C. Like, there were at times, and where like during those the last half of the first round fights, I wanted to give it a D or an F, but that I credit to the fighters that they picked it up and they've made it at least worthy of, as you said, a generous C minus.
Okay. That's a fair grade, and I would rank it. I would rank it as one of the most overhyped seasons in TUF history, if not the most overhyped season ever.
I would say it is the most overhyped season in TUF history.
By the way, you can buy a Team McGregor jersey on the UFC store for $25. In case you're curious, the same goes for Team Chandler. I was looking at the UFC store the other day, and not to get too off topic, but since they started the Venom deal, I am not very impressed with the selections. And as much as we like to hate on the Reebok deal, that's why shirts like these exist. My shirt today says "Fighting's in my DNA." You're not going to get cool custom shirts like this with the Venom deal, unfortunately. So that's an error within itself. But when I saw that you could buy the TUF jersey for super cheap, I was very surprised.
I mean, the Reebok deal, it was a disaster, though. I mean, you saw the unveiling of it 10-ish years ago.
Oh, I know. And let's be honest, have the Venom fight kits really changed anything in terms of the style? They almost look exactly the same.
I know. Actually, I did find the Jed Goodman tweet, by the way. So, episode 10, 2 weeks ago's episode, averaged 212,000 viewers, which is a 0.08 in the 18 to 49 demographic. Episode 1 had 294,000, a 0.14. And then we went from 294K. Episode 2 was 274K. Episode 3 dropped all the way down to 222K, but actually no, that was still June. 486K for episode 4. I think that might have been the episode where we had the McGregor Chandler shove in the cage. 254K, 204K, and I think that 204K Zain was July 4th. So obviously that might have played a role. But then Zain, episode 7, 174K, 145K, 181K. Episode 10 went back all the way back to 212K. The last season on FS1, TUF 28, episode 10 was 152,000 viewers. The last time McGregor coached, which was also on FS1, episode 10 of season 22, averaged about 500,000 viewers.
Well, keep in mind, McGregor was the champion at the time. Or
the interim champ. Yeah, he was about to fight Albano.
The interim champ, yeah. So that also had something to do with it. And just the time slot in general, I don't think was all that great. But that's either here nor there. I was going to make fun of it and say that those, well, I guess I'll just say it. I was going to not say it, but I'm going to say it. Those numbers, you listing them off, those sound like some UFC Fight Pass numbers to me.
Well, the credit, Zain, is that we don't know the ESPN Plus numbers because everything with ESPN Plus is hush, hush. You know, we don't have to know.
Right. I'm curious. How do you think the show did internationally on TNT Sports? What do you think?
I'd have to say probably meh as well.
I would say the same thing considering it was at 2 a.m. But yeah.
My question, Zain, is, I mean, what do you think some of the cause of this is? Is it the fact that Conor maybe not as popular as he once was? Could it
no,
be?
It's not. It's not that at all.
Is it because the production has gone stale?
It's that, and the fact that we didn't have a date for the fight. If there was a date for the fight, and they kept running the same promo over and over again for the fight, we knew it was December 16th. We knew it was whenever it was. It would have enticed more people to like shove it in their face, like, "Hey, UFC 296, don't forget to see it," etc., etc., etc. We had none of that. If it did, I think it would have changed things.
So it comes down to the point we've been talking about on our episodes of Outsiders. This Saturday, and I've seen nothing, by the way, from Chandler's appearance with Dean Thomas after Duff. So that means Saturday is last chance, right? Saturday, we have to get some sort of sign about this fight happening. I know Dana's mentioned at the end of tonight's episode, he says the fight is happening. Conor calling it the biggest comeback in all of sports. Conor and Chandler each having their tweets out. But Chandler, on his tweet out tonight, one of his tweets tonight said he's going to be in Boston. He even made mention of it yesterday or 2 days ago. He is going to be in Boston. But we don't know anything about if Conor's going to be in Boston. We could assume if Conor is going to be in Boston, then at some point on Saturday night, be it after the 2 fights, finale fights on the prelims, or at some point during the pay-per-view main card.
My guess is that it's going to be after the first fight on the main card. They're going to do a major reveal.
They're going to do the promo and all, and they're going to say December 16th.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the optimal time to do it. I shouldn't say optimal because, as you talked about, how it may have affected the TUF season, but it's your last chance at this point for. It's gonna be
some massive promo that's gonna be like the return of the Notorious on one screen, and then it's gonna cut to like his words of the biggest comeback in sports history, and it's gonna be like it's on in bold capital letters. Then it's gonna be and then it's gonna be some sort of like explosion. It's gonna be like an old school feel when Chuck fought Tito for the first time or something like that. It's gonna be a very weird promo, and then John Anik's gonna try to do his best impersonation of Mike Goldberg, and Mike Goldberg said at UFC 199. I mean, does that mean that Brock Lesnar's back, and John Anik's gonna try to throw in his own version or his own Irish reference? It's gonna be something super clever.
And then they're gonna cut to the broadcast where you had Goldberg and Rogan reacting to the promo, even though we all kind of knew already at that point Brock Lesnar was returning because of Ariel Helwani.
Could you imagine if Ariel Helwani outscoops them again?
You don't doubt he wouldn't?
Of course he would. He no longer has access to UFC events, so he can.
He plays by his own rules now. He's not even affiliated with ESPN. He's independent Helwani.
It's could you imagine Brett Okamoto did that? Then we would have a serious problem.
If Brett Okamoto did that, I can only imagine what Dana White would do to him.
Oh yeah, it would not be good. Okay, hey, so nonetheless,
he would make Brett Okamoto compete in an episode of Power Slap.
Could you imagine him maybe to fight like Wolverine or something like that? Nonetheless, we're getting off the soapbox. Do you actually think that they will announce the fight this weekend for December 16th at UFC 296, or do you think they won't do it at all?
I'm gonna say they have to. They have to announce it.
Okay. Are they waiting for pending legal allegations against Conor from the whole Miami Heat incident, or are they just throwing it out the window? What do you think?
You think the UFC and Dana White give a shit about that?
No. No.
What they're waiting for, Sam, the only thing that I could assume that they're going to be waiting on, if there's anything, which I don't know, is probably why they can't be honest about it, is it USADA? Is it that, Chandler, in the words of Chandler and Gaethje, Conor has to go pee in the cup?
Yeah, I think it's either a USADA issue, or it could. Hey, this is an outlier. I could be wrong. I could be speaking out of my ass here, but I'm just gonna say it. This is an outlier scenario. It could very well be negotiations between whether or not Allegiant Stadium wants the fight, or T-Mobile Arena. Because remember, for months, Dana hinted that he was trying to make a fight like that in an NFL stadium.
Yes, but I think when the license report went out, because MMA Junkie, I think, is usually very good on those.
You're right. No,
they said December 16th for T-Mobile.
Okay.
Now I'm not saying they didn't try. Maybe they tried, but especially Zain, at this point, 4 months, you gotta go with what you can, and with 4 months left to go, with a fight not official yet, you gotta make do with what you got. Also, I'm kind of curious, and I don't know if you looked this up already or not. What does the Raiders season look like in terms of home games? Oh, I got it. So, yeah, that's going to be a problem. December 14th, that week they're playing. It's December 14th. They're playing Thursday Night Football in Allegiant Stadium against the Chargers.
Yeah, they're not going to be able to turn that around in 48 hours. There's no way.
And December 10th, they play the Minnesota Vikings in Allegiant Stadium. The weekend before that, Zain, they do have a bye week. So if they wanted to do it at the beginning of December, but by this point, I think it's been pretty clear that it's going to be December 16th. And on top of that, Zain, they played November 26th, December 10th, December 14th, all at Allegiant Stadium. So I assume if you're the grounds people in charge of the Raiders organization, you don't want, too much change around when you have all that time at home.
No, that's very well said. Okay, so I guess in regards to the fight itself, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you've basically been promoting the fight for a year. Do you think you just blew your chance at a world tour because you've waited so long to announce the fight that you can no longer do a world tour, more than likely?
Yes, but I don't know if this fight was going to be world tour worthy anyway, simply because
there's no belt on the line.
There's no belts on the line. It's not like Conor's coming in on a big winning streak like he was with the Aldo fight. He's, Sam, we've talked about it. He has one win in his last however many fights. He hasn't won a meaningful fight since he won the lightweight belt.
One win in his last 5.
One win in his last 5. And he hasn't won Zain a meaningful fight since he won the lightweight title in 2016. So yes, Conor still has the popularity, like you said before, still has the popularity that he did years ago, but he's not the same fighter. And so this fight, is not going to have that. It's not like he's facing Islam Makhachev for the lightweight title.
Yeah, this feels like Tyson versus Lennox Lewis in 2002, where it just feels like Tyson was on his way out from the second that fight was announced, and it feels very similar almost 20 years later.
And we'll talk about it, Zain, on this week's episode of the MMA Outsiders, our big episode 50. We'll talk about Conor's comments from the Anthony Joshua fight, where he said the plan right now is Chandler in December, Gaethje for the BMF belt, and the Nate trilogy. And I would assume, Zain, I doubt that plan goes to fruition, but I assume if that plays out the way Conor wants it, that Conor Nate fight would be a double retirement, I would assume.
Yeah, and I don't know if you thought a step ahead, but my guess as to when those fights would occur, it would be Chandler December 16th, it would be Justin Gaethje in March, and it would be Nate Diaz in July for International Fight Week 2024.
But that's also, Zain, if Conor wins this fight with Chandler in December,
which he has to. More than likely, if he wants to start his season and keep it going, or just be, he has to win the Chandler fight. Otherwise, the whole thing is up in smoke.
I mean, it's still Conor, and the UFC loves Conor because he can drive the million pay-per-view buy. So I don't doubt, that because it's the BMF belt. It's the only belt that Conor can go for at this point. So I don't doubt he versus Gaethje can still happen, but I don't think it happens as quick as that. I could see, Zain, if Conor, wins the fight, or he goes to a decision with Chandler, which I highly doubt that happens. But in other words, if he's healthy enough, I could see that Gaethje fight, maybe not for March, but maybe for International Fight Week. Because the other thing you got to remember about the Nate fight, Zain, is Nate's no longer under UFC contract, which means there's going to be a whole negotiation with him.
Yeah, that's going to be a wild story in itself outside of the fight, which is going to be super cool to cover, because I think there's going to be a lot of layers to that trilogy that we don't see coming right now. But when we do, we're going to be like, wow, we have a whole lot of work to do when it comes to coverage, even before this fight is remotely considered being signed. But nonetheless, though, if the fight has happened, I guess we can kind of wrap it up with this. I don't know if I made my stance clear. It's been a couple months. I'm still picking Chandler to beat McGregor. I mean, assuming the fight does happen.
Zain, I'm going to go one step further than you.
Okay.
I think Chandler wins, and in McGregor's own words from many years ago, 1 round. I think it doesn't even go 5 minutes. I think Chandler makes quick work of him.
No way. That's crazy.
I think it only goes around.
Okay.
All right. Some other things to go over, Zain. Best part of the season, worst part of the season.
The best part of the season for sure was the Conor McGregor Michael Chandler shove in the middle of the octagon and Dana White losing his mind. The worst part of the season,
out of my way.
The worst part of the season to me, without question, is when Conor decided to be a no-show the first time, and we were all very confused as to what was going on. Because my first reaction was, oh shoot, did something happen injury-wise to where we have a coaching switch, which would have been unbelievable.
It would have been the biggest what do they call it in wrestling? Oh, bait and switch. It would have been the biggest bait and switch in UFC in TUF history.
Without a doubt. Even bigger than Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz, for sure.
So, yeah, I'm going to agree with you somewhat, Zain, but I'm just going to stretch it to just Conor. Conor being the worst part of the season. Because, yes, this is one of those things where it's like, yes, he helped make the season, And it also hurt the season. Now, again, I can't blame everything on this season on Conor McGregor. Again, he is not in charge of production. He did not, for what we know, come up with this prospects versus veterans idea that just absolutely flopped. But it was the fact, Zain, that you only saw him, in Aaron McKenzie's words from that interview I watched, that he was only there for the evening sessions. He wasn't there for the weigh-ins. You had Chandler basically saying, McGregor's not there for his team. Oh, how about, Zain, the fact the Trevor Wells Timur Valiev, the fight had to be delayed because of the thing that happened to Trevor.
Yeah, that was bizarre.
Wasn't it like an infection or something?
Yeah, over his eye.
So they had to push the fight back. He didn't even show up for the weight negotiations.
Yeah, he had to be called on the phone. It was very bizarre.
So in some ways, Conor did kind of, play such a bit. Let's face it, Zain. The reason this TUF season existed was just a whole bunch of Conor hype.
Oh, for sure.
That's all it was just Conor hype. Which, again, adds to the frustration that we don't have an official date for this fight.
Well, granted, when we do get an official date, it's going to make the fight even bigger. That's for sure.
It better. That's why I said it better be announced Saturday. Best part of the season, yeah, I gotta go with the shove, I guess. Just because it birthed us the Dana White meme.
Without a doubt.
I wish I could have said the coach's challenge, but yeah, after last week, it's kind of worn off on me. Like, that wasn't really that fun.
No, it was not. It was not as fun as what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I agree. Your fight of the season. Zain, 3 fights for me come to mind for, that really impressed me this season. Number 1 was the opening round, Trevor Wells, Timur Valiev. Number 2, I'm not saying this in an order, by the way. I'm just saying, the fights that stood out to me. 1 was Wells Valiev. 2 was Night Hallball that we had last week. And number 3 was the week before that, Katona Valiev. So if I have to pick, I would say Katona Valiev 1, Night Hallball 2, Wells Valiev 3.
Yeah, Wells Valiev is on my list. Roosevelt Roberts' opening round knockout was very impressive. And I would also argue, I know this is recency bias, but Cody Gibson's one-sided performance tonight takes the cake for me. I don't think we've seen that dominant of a performance from what I can remember, where you got to see all of his skills in almost 5 minutes of work, and I just thought he was very impressive, so that would be my third.
I think that Roosevelt Roberts first round knockout in like 30-something seconds to open the season, because that opened the season with a bang. I will admit that did open the season with a bang, and I think that was the finish of the season. Actually, no, I'm gonna scratch it. I think that was one of 2 finishes of the season. I think you also have to shout out, which fight was it? Oh, Kurt Holobaugh, how he got the last minute comeback of Lee Hammond.
Yeah, that was an absurd fight.
Fighter of the season, I have to give it, Zain, to, for me personally, 2 guys. One would have to be Timur, and the other would have to be probably Rowe.
Interesting. I have to give my fighter of the season to Cody Gibson, just considering that he came back from the knee injury, and quite frankly, he didn't have to fight, but he decided to gut it out.
I'm gonna make Gibson a third.
Yeah, I'm only picking one because it said fighter of the season, so that would be my one pick is Cody Gibson.
And actually, Roosevelt did have the boring fight with Hubbard. You know what? Here's how I'll rank it. I'll give it to Timur. I'm gonna make Gibson second on my rankings, and then third would be Rowe.
Okay.
All right. Last couple of minutes in, let's go over these fights. We're only going to go over these fights here on our episode this Thursday morning. We're just going to focus on the 5 main card fights as well as the Chris Weidman return. So We'll remind you on that episode to come here for the full breakdowns of these fights. We're going to begin with the lightweight finals, and that was made official last week. Both representing Team Chandler. It's Austin Hubbard, Kurt Hallbaugh. Austin Hubbard, I was kind of high-ish on from the very beginning of this season in terms of the lightweights. Kurt Hallbaugh, though, Zan, as I kind of alluded to, I do have some favoritism toward, considering we had a really good conversation a couple of years ago. I saw his work, liked it, and just mentioned the unbelievable comeback he had in the opening round of the season, and then he and Knight last week putting on an absolute display.
Yeah, Kurt Hallbaugh in Boston is recipe for success. I see him winning in the second round by submission. I think Austin Hubbard is a real stud, though. It's going to be a tough fight for both guys. They're going to go in there and scrap. It sucks that either of these guys have to lose because I like both of them, but I want to say that Kurt Hallbaugh's wrestling and jiu-jitsu is a little bit too much, and I think he finishes Hubbard.
And that's the tough thing, Zan, is that Hubbard is a really all-around good fighter. So I feel like, I don't know, Zan, am I crazy to say that I think Hubbard is the more of a challenge than Knight and Hammond gave to him during the show combined?
I would argue that that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So I think this is going to be a tough one. I want to lean to Hubbard, but now that you picked Hallbaugh and I have my favorite, it's like, do I jump ship with you because it's Hallbaugh? It's my guy. You know what? Screw it. I'll go Kurt Hallbaugh. I'll go second round submission again.
Okay.
And then we got Brad Katona, Cody Gibson. Zan, I love what Cody did tonight. I know he's your fighter of the season, but Brad Katona I was so high on. And Brad Katona, he's won this before. And Zan, it may not be, if you remember their words tonight, Cody said, "Oh, you'll just grab my leg for 15 minutes." It may not be an exciting fight, but Katona, I think he just has more in the tank, better strategy, better all around than Cody has. So I give all the heart for Cody. I want him to get a contract. I don't think he's going to get the win in this, though, Zan. I think Brad Katona makes history and becomes the first two-time TUF winner. I say Brad Katona decision.
I think we're going to get some controversy. I think it goes to a split decision. You're going to find this crazy. I think one of the judges scores it 28-28, but it's going to be a majority decision for Brad Katona. But there's going to be some controversy with one of the judges, so look out for that.
Zen, could you imagine if one judge scores the 28-28 and then it splits two ways, like one goes Katona, one goes Gibson, and it's a split draw?
That would be absolutely devastating.
What would happen? Would they do the tiebreaker round like they do on the show?
They would have to, yeah, because it's built into the fight. They have to do a tiebreaker for the front because it's technically the TUF finale. Yeah,
it reminds me of. It reminds me of kickboxing, where it's like each fighter gets dropped, and then they say at the end of like extra round. It's like, oh boy.
Yeah. Well, it would be kind of cool if they did change it to make it like a sudden death overtime almost, where if one fighter drops the other and hurts them, that's how they win instead of going for like 5 more minutes. That would be insane, though.
That would be insane. Zen, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but our TUF 31 journey has come to an end.
I know, and it was definitely a wild ride, despite my absence. Again, we hope you enjoyed this newfound venture of Tough Enough.
I want to give a shout out. Sorry, Zan, but I want to give a shout because you mentioned us passing 500 subscribers before. This show, Zan, most weeks got hundreds of views across the YouTube and adding in all the social media viewings on the live stream. So I want to give a shout out to all of you out there who viewed this show, whether you like us or you can't stand us, for making us the #1 show on the Empty the Bench network for the time that we've been around.
Yeah, we want to thank you again, and truly though, if any of you guys do hate us, it motivates us to make better content. So So we want to, we don't want to spur away from negativity. We're going to try to embrace negativity and make sure we're giving you guys the content that you're looking for. And again, as Tom alluded to, thank you to every single one of you that's watched the show, liked the show, subscribed to the ETB Network because of it, shared the show, et cetera, et cetera. We could not do it without you. And of course, that entices us to let you know that our 50th episode of the MMA Outsiders will be coming out later this week. So stay tuned for that. We're going to preview UFC June 92 and all of the other goodies happening around combat sports. Before we get out of here, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Be sure to share the show across social media. You can follow us at MMA Outsiders ETB. I'm Zain Bando. I'm a staff writer for BJPenn.com. And of course, to my left is Tom Albano. He's a contributor for Fansided MMA. You can also find more of his work over at the PFL website, as he will be busy cranking through the remainder of the PFL playoffs, whereas I am
Friday night MSG.
And as that is true, Friday night MSG, the PFL playoffs continue. It should be an unbelievable main card. We're going to break it all down and all of the happenings there. But again, thank you for tuning in to Tough Enough. We really appreciate it. And until next season, we'll see you guys later. And we'd like to also know in the comments, who do you have for the presumed date of December 16th, Conor McGregor or Michael Chandler?
And who you have for this weekend's finale fights, too. We want to know who you have for this weekend. Before we get out of here, shout out to Nick Morgensen for letting us do this. Shout out to everybody at the Empty the Bench Network for all the support. Shout out to Aaron McKenzie, tough contestant for this season, who constantly liked our work and followed along with us. Hopefully, maybe we can get him on to talk about the show very soon. And shout out tonight to everybody who has followed us on social media, followed all of our, live tweeting and the broadcasting of this show. And of course, special shout out tonight, Zain, to Dylan Dennis for that awesome post that he gave. For all the negative, even though we were negative in the video, he said, I respect all opinions, keep up the good work. That actually kind of warrants me. And like you said, kind of wants us to do more with this, more content and such. So it's all of you guys out there, and it's all the comments from all the fighters and all the support that really keeps us going. So just thank you to everybody out there who has viewed, commented, shared, as you mentioned, Zain. It's been an unbelievable ride. I hope we get the chance to, for as much as we talked about how bad, and how mixed of a bag this season was, there was all the good that came out of that. We hope that all of you who follow us along on this ride continue to follow us along with the episodes of the MMA Outsiders, which you can catch this week. It'll be Thursday again, 9 a.m. Eastern. The hope is by September, we go back to our Tuesday morning slot, I think, that we've constantly had. So
that's exactly right.
So
and of course, Tom, I couldn't do this without you, and vice versa. So
yes, shout out to you as well. And Zain, before we get out of here, as we like to say, and especially Zain, because it's now Dana White Contender Series time, be Joe Pyfer.
Yeah, be Joe Pyfer and put on impressive performances, and you never know what could happen.
So, for Zain Bando and everybody here at the Empty the Bench Network, I am Tom Albano. Thank you for the journey that has been Tough Enough, the Ultimate Fighter, Season 31, Team McGregor versus Team Chandler Aftermath. Thank you for everybody who has watched our live streams, and we'll see you on the next edition of the MMA Outsiders for episode 50, and we'll see you, hopefully, for the next season of Tough. Take care, everybody. Farewell for now.
Take care, everyone.